started asking, why do we want e-government for urban migrants? And the reason for this is because e-government services, especially for people who have newly arrived in a city and are integrating into a neighborhood, can remove barriers to access to necessary municipal services, especially when people don't live near city cores. So e-government is actually a really great way to help people settle into cities. And we see evidence of this in cities like Wellington, New Zealand. There are studies in Texas in the United States that actually show when you make a point of digital inclusion for newly arrived refugees and newly arrived migrants, that can work really well. So something that motivated this research project was a lot of the evidence around e-government services and their benefits to migrants and refugees come from wealthy municipalities dealing with a relatively small number of new arrivals. Most refugees and displaced people, and many urban migrants though, are moving to cities in middle-income countries and low-income countries. And what we wanted to understand was, do these people moving to cities like Bogota have access to smartphones and the internet? And do they also have access to municipal services, such as e-government platforms in the cities they arrive in? When we did our work in Bogota, we focused on Venezuelans who had been arriving in Bogota in the last about 5 years. And what we found was that they did have access to ICTs, they did have access to smartphones, they did gain access to the internet, but the situation was really challenging because they didn't have ID, they didn't have official regular status, which in our findings actually showed was a key barrier to gaining access to e-government services. So in comparison to their Colombian neighbors, they were much less likely to sign up children for school, to register addresses, and to do administrative tasks that they could really do online effectively if they had this access otherwise. We saw that Venezuelans often did not, at the time we did the research, have the proper ID, the proper documentation to access formal e-government platforms. But they did have the technology. And recently, in the last year, the Colombian government has put in place new laws to allow Venezuelans who have arrived since 2016 to register, to have formalized migration status, and to have the right to work. And for us, this really squares the circle between having access to ICTs and shows how important it is to also have supportive policy in place in terms of migration policy and technology policy, so that those who need it most and those who can benefit from it most have access to e-government services in municipalities like Bogota.